Good evening, everybody. I am Minister Marcus, and I want to welcome you to the Maximize Your Life Bible study. And what I do every Wednesday night is I pull out lessons from the Bible that help you maximize your life, different areas of your life, every area of your life. And so, what I try to do on Wednesday nights is I try to give you something that you can actually put in practice in your life. And so, we learn about God, but we also learn how to align ourselves under God's favor. And so, tonight, our lesson is all about the things that Ruth teaches us about God. As you know, we've been in Ruth, and this is the last Wednesday night in Ruth. It's the end of the month. Next month, we're going to First Samuel. But tonight, I got three things about God that we learned through the book of Ruth, and I'm gonna just dive right in. I'm not gonna take up a lot of your time tonight. Hopefully, you get something that you can actually use and apply to your life. But we are going to Ruth chapter 4. And if you do want to catch those other lessons, they are all on our YouTube channel. You can always go and watch whatever lesson series that you like. We are in Ruth chapter 4. Oh, one more thing. Please go and subscribe if you haven't already. TGM Television is our YouTube channel, and I upload every Wednesday night Bible study and also the Sunday morning messages. So if you guys just want to get you a quick word, please go and subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called TGM Television. It's the name of our YouTube channel, and you just hit the subscribe button and hit the bell, and it'll notify you of everything that we post. Okay, everything that I post. Also in the mornings, sometimes I give you a short inspirational video, maybe 2 to 4 or 5 minutes. So, man, I think that really encourage you as you driving to work or whatever in the mornings. So, yeah, go and subscribe, man, and get that. All right, so we are in Ruth chapter 4. I'm going to start at verse 13 and I'm going to read to verse number 17. And it says, So Boaz took Ruth and she became his wife, and he went in to her, and the Lord enabled her to conceive, and she gave birth to a son. Then the women said to Naomi, Blessed is the Lord who has not left you without a redeemer today, and may his name become famous in Israel. May he also be to you a restorer of life and a sustainer of your old age. For your daughter in law, who loves you and is better to you than 7 sons, has given birth to him. Then Naomi took the child and laid him in her lap and became his nurse. The neighbor women gave him a name, saying, A son has been born to Naomi. Notice they didn't say been born to Ruth. That was his mom's name. No, a son has been born to Naomi. So they named him Obed. He is the father of Jesse, the father of King David. All right. And so tonight, I want to highlight three things that we learn about God from studying the book of Ruth. And so, one of the things I always love to highlight about stories like this, and it reads as a story, is that God is not directly mentioned as a main factor of the book, and it just lets you read the story, right? And then as you go through the story, you know what I'm saying, you can kind of see where God is doing this or God is doing that. And so this is the meaning of tonight's lesson. And so I want to start that even though God is not mentioned as a major factor of the book, there are things that we learn about God from the book. And here's what I want to point out. The first thing, God restored their joy at the end of the book. And so my number one is that God is a God of restoration. I want you to say that. The first thing we learn about God is that God is a God of restoration. If you have a pen, write that God is a God who restores. And I want you to get this, that what you have heard probably over some pulpits, that he'll give you double for your trouble, right? But saying that God is a restorer, it kind of works different. And we get that from the story of Job, right? Where they say he'll give you double for your trouble. But when I say restore, I don't want you to think of it as double for your trouble. I want you to think of it as God restoring something to its former condition, right? And so what that means is that God is, if you have lost a loved one, if you remember the beginning of the story, Ruth and Naomi both lost their husbands. And so when I say that God is a God who restores, that does not mean that he's going to bring them back to life. And I want you to understand that when I say that God is a restorer, what I want you to understand that I want you to understand that no matter what you lose, that God is able to give you something to bring that joy, or to bring that, in other words, that God will give you something to replace it. And I want you to understand that when the story first starts off, Naomi is happy. Naomi has joy in her life. Her life is full. And then at the end of chapter 1, it says she came back empty. And it's because she felt like God's hand was against her. And I want to point that out to you, that sometimes life is going to give you ups, sometimes life is going to give you downs. But when I say that God is a restorer, what I mean is that there may be a time in your life that you were really happy, and then you're dealing with a sad period right now. When I say that God is a God who restores, what I'm saying is that God will bring that joy back into your life. He'll bring that happiness back into your life. And so when I say that God is a restorer, I don't want you to think that God eliminates the bad in our life, because loss is a part of life. Disappointments are a part of life. Death is a part of life. Struggles are a part of life. Periods of loneliness are a part of life. But when I say that God is a God who restores, what I mean is that you won't be lonely forever. You won't be unhappy forever. You won't be sad forever. The time that you can think of that you were happy, God may not bring those times back, but He will bring happiness back into your life. God may not bring it back the same way that it was, but God is able to bring it back. He'll bring the nature of the relationship you had with the person who may have passed away through somebody else. And this is why I always have to stress to Christians that you can't get discouraged on the things that you lost, right? You can't get discouraged on the things that you lost, because anytime God moves one thing, it's because He's going to fill it with something else. And I want you to get that. When I say God will restore it, what I'm saying is that God will bring the nature of it back. So if you were happy and you got sad, that God is a God who will bring that happiness back. And this is why you can't focus on what you lost, but you have to trust God as you look forward to what's coming. It's okay to be sad about what you lost, but you got to know and trust that God didn't move it without having a plan to give you something to replace it. And so when I say that God will restore it, I'm saying that God will bring back the joy in your life, that God will bring back the peace in your life. God will bring back the happiness in your life. God will bring back the love in your life. I never forget when my grandfather passed away, and me and my cousins, we were all close, right? But it seemed like when grandpa passed away, it made us closer, right? And so the love that we had for grandpa, that God just reconnected us to each other, and that love was able to stay alive. And the sadness that we felt stayed sad, but at the same time, what God did is He restored the love connections that we had. He brought us closer together, so that the friendship that we had with our grandpa, we ended up having it with one another. And this is what I'm trying to get you to understand, that when I say that God is going to restore it, I want you to understand that God is going to bring it back to the way it was, not necessarily with the people that it was, but you won't be sad forever. You won't be depressed forever. You won't be broke forever. If you had a period of good times in your life, and now you may be dealing with some negative or some bad times in your life, don't get stuck in the bad times. Don't get stuck in depression. Don't get stuck in sadness. And this is why I have to encourage you on Wednesday nights, because sometimes life takes you on ups, but then it takes you on downs. And it's in the down times that you got to remember that God is able to restore the good back into your life. And so that's the first thing we learn about God. At the end of the story, we see that God restored their joy, that God restored the love and the happiness, that God brought fulfillment and fullness back into their lives. And so the first thing we learn about God is that God is a God who is able to restore. All right, and so here's my number two. We moving. At the end of the story, we can see the plan of God. If you read what we just read, it said that she gave birth to Obed, Obed gave birth to Jesse, and Jesse gave birth to David, who was the king after God's own heart. And so it's at the end of the story we can see the plan of God. But here's what I want to point out. The power of God is seen when you put the plan of God, which we understand at the end of the story, God's plan was to bring David through the union of Boaz and Ruth. But if the power of God is seen when you put that in context, or at the beginning of the book, it says that during the time of the judges. That means that this book is set at a time in the history of Israel that every man did what was right in his own eyes. And I want you to understand that. Remember last month we talked about how up and down and crazy the nation of Israel was, and how they were constantly in captivity, and they had a cycle of events, and it was just a real chaotic time in the history of Israel. And this is where I believe that we see the power of God. We see the power of God. All this happened during a chaotic time in Israel's history. But even in the middle of chaos, God was still able to carry out his plan. And I want you to get that even in the chaos, God still was working out a plan. And here's what the second thing that we learn about God through the book of Ruth is that chaotic times cannot stop the plan of God. I want to say that again. Chaotic times cannot stop the plan of God. And I want to stress that because many people, many of you get discouraged during times of upset, times of disappointment, times of chaos, when it seems like things are going on haywire, because oftentimes many people feel like the chaotic times are going to hinder or stop God's plan. But I want you to understand this, that no matter what happens in your life, if God wants something good to come from it, it's going to come. If God wants something good to come from it, it will come. It does not matter how chaotic it gets. And this is what I tell people who are trying to reform their lives. I tell them all the time that, listen, just because you had a period of chaos in your life, right? Just because you had a crazy moment in your life, that does not mean that God was not working while you had the chaotic times. And I want to stress that, right? Because just because things look like they're out of control, that does not mean that God has stopped being in control. And I want to stress that to you. When COVID hit, right, it shook everybody up. But, for me, I was waiting just to see what God was going to work out, because I understand that when things go haywire, that does not mean that God has lost control. And I want to stress that, right? Because so many times we feel like that when things are not going right, that God can't work. But I have learned through periods of not just my own life, but by reading stories in the Bible and seeing how God does things in the Bible, by seeing how he performs in my own life. The very times that you don't think God is doing nothing, or that you don't think he's able to do anything, are the very time that he's doing his greatest work. And this is why the Bible can say no weapon formed will prosper, because nothing can stop what God intends to make happen in your life. And I want you to get, just because somebody forms a weapon, that don't mean that it's going to prosper. If God wants you to win, you will win. And I want you to get that nothing can stop the plan of God. When I see Jesus in the New Testament, and he's riding on a boat with the disciples, and the storm is coming, right? And they, Jesus, dude, don't you care that we perish? Remember that when Jesus says, "Where is your faith?" And it was just getting them to understand that the storm does not stop the power of God. And I want that to sink into your minds as you watch and as you listening tonight. That the storm does not stop the power of God. And it takes time and experiences that teach you to trust God, not because you're unbothered by the storm, not because you're unbothered by the chaos, but because you understand that chaos won't stop the power of God, that storms don't stop the power of God, enemies don't stop the power of God, people coming against you don't stop the power of God. Things that happen in your life do not stop the power nor the plan of God. And so I want that to encourage you, that God has power, not just when things are going good, but God has power when things are going however they going, because he's God. And I want you to understand that we don't just serve a God who can't move just because things prohibit him from moving, but he is the God, the sovereign God, who controls the universe. That means no matter what you do, if God want to bless you, nobody can curse you. If God want to curse you, nobody can bless you. It don't matter. And I want you to get that the storm does not stop God's power. The chaos that will not stop God from carrying out his plan. And finally, here's our number 3. This is what the text says, and I love it. I love that the women around her neighbors, man, they really were an encouragement to her, because what they say is that the Lord has not left you. I like that the Lord has not left you. And I'm gonna just cut that sentence off right there. The Lord has not left you. And the thing that we learn about God is that the times that it seems like God is not around are the times that God is actually around. And I'm gonna share with y'all a story from my childhood. When we were growing up, we grew up poor. When I say poor, we grew up poor. And if you were to look at our lives, we got talked about in school because our clothes was beat up and tore up. I had hand-me-downs. By the time they got to me, the shoes was, you know what I'm saying, raggedy and beat up. We lived in a small house. It was tough for us. But here's what I want to stress about that is that during that time, we struggled. My mom struggled. She worked 2 and 3 jobs just to make sure we was good. And if we were in those times and we were feeling those times, right, and it seemed like that God was nowhere around, only to get older and to discover that from that place, from that difficult, strenuous place, that my mom worked 2 and 3 jobs, that we struggled and we wore hand-me-downs, that all of these things were going seemingly so wrong. It's not until we get older that we see that God kept us. He kept us out of so many things. He kept us out of jail. He kept us from getting shot and getting into things that were going to destroy our lives. And so I said that to say that in the time that you don't see God and it seems like he's not around, that's when God is doing his best work. Sometimes you don't see what God is doing until after it has been done. And I want to remind you, come on, say, the Lord has not left me. I want you to hear it. The Lord has not left you. Remind yourself that God has not left you in your sadness. He has not left you in your pain. But sometimes you don't see what God is doing until after it's done. And I want you to get this. In chapter 1, we didn't see it. In chapter 2, it started coming together. By chapter 3, you knew something was going on. But it's not until chapter 4 that we see God had a plan the entire time. And I want to stress that to you, that there will be times that you won't see that it was God until the end of your situation. And that's sometimes the difficult part about walking with God, is that you can't see God while he's walking with you. You can't feel him while you're dealing with your problems. You can only see and feel your circumstances. But I want you to understand that sometimes you won't be able to see what God is doing until after it's done. And then you look back, you realize that God was at work during a period that it looked like nothing was happening. And I want to stress this tonight before I go off, that we walk by faith and not by sight. See, we were looking to see God in our circumstance. You may be looking to see God in your circumstance, but there will be times that God's activity will not be seen in the beginning. And this is what it means to walk by faith. You got to walk with your head held high, dealing with the things that you deal with, trusting that God is working. And I want you to hear that you may not see what God is doing until after it's done. And I want you to get this, that the genealogy at the end of the book shows that God brought King David through these events. It shows us that God had a plan all along, even though he is not directly mentioned throughout the entire story, but his plan is seen in the end. And I want you to remind yourself that you will not see what God is doing until after it has been done. Man, God, so with that, God, I hope something that I said tonight encouraged your heart. I hope something that I said tonight gave you a better perspective, encouraged your faith to keep going, to keep pushing, keep striving for whatever it is that you're chasing after in your life. Was not designed to be a long lesson at all. I don't feel like it takes an hour for God to speak a word, but God can say something so profound in 5 or 10 or 15 minutes that'll revolutionize your life. And I hope tonight that something that I said is able to revolutionize your mindset or give you a different perspective. So guys, with that, I encourage everybody to visit our website, www.thegodmovement.com. Become a member on the website. And if you don't want to do that, you can subscribe to our YouTube channel. It's called TGM Television. Again, TGM television. So with that, guys, I'm going offline. Thank you guys for watching. I hope to see you guys next Wednesday. I come on every Wednesday night at 8:30. So guys, be willing, be ready to tune in. Share this with somebody who needs to get a word. And so with that, guys, I love you guys. I will see y'all next Wednesday night, and y'all have a blessed evening. God bless you.